This tutorial is going to be on how you would create a story map in ArcGIS online. Story map is a somewhat more advanced technique in that it needs to build off of an existing web map. So if you don't know how to use ArcGIS online, or you're not comfortable, you can go back and watch some of the earlier videos on this series, such as the basic functionality of ArcGIS Online and how to upload data to ArcGIS Online, because you're going to need to be able to have a functioning web map to even create a story map. So the general purpose of a story map is to give you, some of the benefits of, a PowerPoint presentation combined with the benefits of exploring a map live. So I won't pretend that story maps don't have their own limitations in terms of font choices and locations of things. You'd have to be pretty knowledgeable with coding and learn the API to customize it a bit more. But the templates do give you some ability to mess around and tell cool stories. But really what it allows you to do is have this narrative. This is one that had made recently about the importance of defining geographies for the Chicago Anchors for a Strong Economy initiative in the Chicagoland area. And it allows you to have text to tell your story, to show things on a map, to engage with a legend, and then allows you to begin to walk through the story. So this one talks about this idea of geographies. For a while, people thought, regional would be the place you'd want to hire employees in this example. But if you look at the data, 96% of all employees, are coming from that. The story's not important in this video. I'm just, giving you a little bit of context here. And, you can keep going forward, and then you head to this one, and notice the extents might change and the information on the map changes. This one here tries to show the distressed communities in Chicagoland area. The legend would change. And I guess, again, the cool thing is, imagine somebody might pause here. You may be in a moment where someone goes, well, this is interesting, what's happening? Talk to me about this area here. And you can begin to engage with your map, right? And you can actually start to come down, click on a piece of data. Oh, yeah, well, that's this zip code. Its distress score is this, and these tend to be the metrics that are associated with that one. And then the person who's in your presentation, might say, oh, that's great, thank you for doing that. I wanted to clear that up. And then you can hop right back up into your narrative, right? So it gives you that freedom to really interact with your data, and I think it also gives you that freedom, unlike PowerPoint or InDesign or these other presentations where you're anytime you create an extent, and you're sort of fixed with it until you update the map. Whereas this, you're simply loading the data, and then you're just turning layers on and off, and changing symbologies on the fly. So, it also gives you the ability to engage as well if you wanted to click on a link that shows somebody something a little bit different than what they had seen previously. For example, this one is showing the areas of overlap where you could get to an institution within 30 minutes. The dark areas you could access 4 within 30 minutes, down to like the white areas being light. So again, hopefully this gives kind of some idea of what you're working for here and what you're working toward. So I'm going to walk you through some of the basic steps for how you would essentially create this. So in order to make a story map, you can create it from ArcGIS Online. So if you're signed into ArcGIS Online and you go to create, you can go to create an app, either using the web app builder or a template, and you'll see an option to build a story map. You might not yet be comfortable with what these are. There's like 8 basic templates. But once you get comfortable, it's probably easier just to start from here. But when I'm teaching the lesson, I'm going to start elsewhere. So if you were to go to Google and just search ArcGIS Story Maps, find yourself to a page like this. It's going to ask you to sign in if you're not signed in already. And sign in, and you get to an area like this. And you'd want to go here and you'd want to create a story. So as I said, unless you're knowledgeable of the coding mechanics and can access the developer resources in ArcGIS's API, you are going to be limited to about 8 potential options. They do have a cool thing here I've used in the past that you can kind of click through some, some high-level details of what kind of story you might want to tell, and they'll give you an option. But it's roughly, a map tour gives you some essentially pictures and things you click on, and then the map will take you there. So it's really good for looking at pictures. Map journal, cascade, journal and series, I think are they're good for walking through kind of like a story, and it's just like a different way of telling the story. Map series, you're almost like clicking on tabs in an Excel, and when you click on those tabs, you're switching to different maps. Whereas map journal is what we just looked at, where you are scrolling up and down on the side to tell a story. Cascade is when you want to look more for the text, and it's like the narrative and the images and the graphics that matter, and the map is secondary. Crowdsourcing is really, it's mostly, don't be taken aback by that, thinking it's a really powerful tool. It's primarily used for people to be able to contribute photographs and crowdsource a map, but there's, I think, better ways of crowdsourcing using the collector or other tools than a story map. Short list is another tab-based one. Spyglass and swipe is pretty cool. It's usually for when you want to compare like a before and after, or two images. It'll give the user the ability to literally like move the screen back and forth and move between two maps. And then basic is just if you really want kind of like one map to highlight. So you're going to have to figure out on your own what works for you. The best way would be to just trial and error. But for this one, we're going to do a map journal. So it gives you the same thing. Do you want it kind of like on the side, it's fixed there? Or do you want your, your map to really be focused and then you have something floating next to it? You make your choice. I'll pick floating panel. What do you want to call it? We'll call it example. Oh, I already did that at one point. All right, example today, how about? All right, so it's kind of set this thing up for us here. Main stage and floating panel. So the first thing it's going to ask you to reference is your main stage. You will choose what your main stage would be, and it can shift. It can be a map, which is what you'll commonly use. Sometimes your main page might be an image, and you'll notice as we keep going, this can switch from time to time. Other times you may jump to a video that plays here, and finally you may have your own web page or a website you want to reference that can come up here. The point is that's going to be the primary thing that is demonstrated here. Map is what we're going to focus on the most because it tends to be why you would want to use Story Map. You could see you creating something with just images and video, but I think they're better to be peppered in and the map be the primary focus. So you're going to see that it's asking you to select or create a map. What that means is your story map must be connected to a web map. And that's why I said you want to watch those videos or the original ones in this channel, because you need to be comfortable going to ArcGIS, creating a map, giving it a title. I'm not going to do anything with this one, so these are just going to be literally random words put in here. Right, and loading data and changing the way that it looks, and then saving it, because that is what this is going to reference. That's what your story map's actually going to look at. Your story map, it's almost like it's almost like images. Like you're going to have the ability to turn layers on and off. You're going to have the ability to change your extent, to toggle pop-ups on and off. But the primary content, like the symbology of layers, the transparency, the content that is included in a pop-up, that all has to come from here. So before you even create your story map, or while you're creating it, because you can go back and forth here, you need to actually make any edits to how you want data to show, how you want it to color itself, what information you want. You need actually to create your own map. And that way what you'll do is, again, you'll either create one on the fly, or if you've already built one that you want to reference in a more narrative fashion, you can select one that exists. Right, as you see, there's that random crazy one I just created, blah, 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 blah. But what we really want here is my West cohort review, right? Super helpful tip. When you first start, notice like when it looks at my West cohort review here, it looks almost like blank, versus some of the other maps I've created have content associated with them. That's because it is literally blank. Like I've changed all these layers, I've given them filters, I've made copies, I've given them symbologies, I've changed their pop-up menu. You know, I've modeled them how I want them modeled, but then I turn them off and I actually create this like a blank slate. And the reason is that anything that's turned on will automatically show up on your story map and you'll have to turn it off. That'll be clear what I'm talking about in a moment, but it's just good practice that after you've made your kind of base map that you want to reference, that you just turn the layers off, because you'll be able to turn them on in your story map. So I picked my West cohort review. Now, you will change this on every single page, but what it's going to give you the ability to do is primarily model 3 elements. One is the location of your map. So you can either use what the map always is, or you could go to custom configuration. So if you go here, this is where you determine how you want your map to start. You can zoom in, you can zoom out, it's totally up to you. As we showed previously, your user or the presenter is going to have the ability to move through, but this is where we start. Content. This is where you actually depict what you want to show, right? So I can turn on those. I could turn on just that one. I could turn on that, right? I could turn on this, right? Whatever you want to show is what you might turn on. I maybe just want to show institutions at first, so I'll turn that on. I'll go back to my location because I wanted it to be a bit more zoomed out. And I can kind of zoom out so I'm seeing the majority of my locations here. And maybe that's kind of how I want to start. There's my locations. I want to save my location. You can also pop up, right? If you click on a pop-up, that'll just come up automatically. You know, so if you want something to display right when you come, that's fine. You don't have to do that because, as I mentioned previously, like your user can click on stuff and make them come up. You can do a little overview map if you want, which will put like a little "here we are in the world" on the side. You can allow your legend to show up. You can give your user the ability to search for an address. Once you're done there, you'll move on to here. Like notice it's kind of shown up with the light 2 here. This is essentially your panel. So this is just where you have like an editor window where you make, this is where my content goes. I put content here, exclamation. You can model how it looks. You can model the size. You can model the color to a degree. If you want, you can input media, right? If you have an image that you would want to load here, you could go here, upload a photograph or something that you'd want to load, have it be in the picture. You know, you can undo if there was a challenge. You can make this larger if you need to see. If you're pretty solid, I think this is HTML. If you know it, HTML, you can do that. You know, give yourself a little more flexibility, but if you don't, you would just control here. Right, so it gives you a little bit of ability, blah, 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 all that jazz. And that's the essential basics of a story map right there, right? You've got your title. You can go in at any time and edit. Change your title if you need to. Change the size of the title. Change the color of the title. Change the content in the map. Right, it all reflects right there. Come back in here. Right, give it a nice little save. Always, always good to be saving your map as you're going. So on and so forth. So, that's the basics. I'm going to stop this video now because this one's long, and I'm going to pick it up with the next one to show how you start creating you know, different kinds, or how you start creating multiple slides, and then how you get some cool little tricks where you can make your map somewhat interactive.